Hello, welcome to More Than Meets the DIY, a virtual education series presented by the Pacific Northwest chapter of the Recording Academy and Sonic Guild Seattle. My name is Jessica Toon. I'm the Senior Executive Director of the Recording Academy's Pacific Northwest chapter. We'll be hosting a new session in this series on the first Tuesday of each month through November, featuring a specific topic that's sourced by feedback from our music community. This is our 6th installment in this series. If you want to check out the rest of the series, they're posted on YouTube, where you can search Grammys or Recording Academy membership, and you'll be able to find them. Today, we're diving into advocacy, using your voice to amplify change. For everybody in King County, I hope you voted in the primary election. If you didn't, you have until 8 o'clock to get your ballots in, so please do that. But today, we're really going to talk about what it takes to turn grassroots ideas into tangible policy outcomes. So joining me for this conversation are several heavy hitters, faces that you'll recognize from the Seattle music and creative communities. We're going to kick off today hearing some top-line findings from the Washington's first ever music census, as well as the National Independent Venue Association's recent economic impact report studying the live music sector. So first off, I'd like to welcome Kate Becker, Leigh Bezezekoff, and Jordan Swider. Welcome. Thank you all for being here.
Hello, thank you so much for having us.
So great to see you. Let's do some quick intros. Leigh, let's start with you.
Hello, my name is Leigh Bezezekoff. I'm a co-director of Washington Nightlife and Music Association, WANMA, longtime manager of the Tractor Tavern, managed bands, music festivals, been through the various ringers of the industry, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Jordan?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jordan Swider. I'm also a co-director of Washington Nightlife and Music Association. I've been working in show production and marketing for about 15 years and just happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And Kate Becker, who needs no introduction, but please introduce yourself.
You're so kind, Jess. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Becker. I'm the Creative Economy Director for King County, and I have the pleasure of working with Leigh and Jordan on a regular basis right now on the Washington Music Census and all things WANMA. But I don't always come from the political world. I come mostly from the nonprofit world and co-founded the Vera Project in the old firehouse years ago. Think of myself mostly as an all-ages show producer, but these days I work in politics. So I get to lead the county's Creative Economy Initiative, which is centered in film and music production.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks to the three of you for being here. So we're going to talk a little bit about data, which will really ground us with some context for the conversation that we'll have when we bring on some additional panelists later, really about like how to put that data to use and some things that we can all do to help move policy forward. So let's start with the Washington Music Census. Leigh, I'm going to ask you the big heavy hitting question, the big number. Can you tell us, based on this new census, what the economic impact of the music economy in Washington State is?
Yes, thank you, first of all, to everybody who participated in the groundbreaking first statewide music census. We were able to collect a lot of information from people all across the state in a wide variety of sectors within the industry. And it is giving us the tools and resources to be able to go to our politicians, our policymakers, other folks in the nonprofit world, and help arm them with data and information about what our ecosystem is looking like and what we're experiencing, and ideas for change and help and resources, which we all need. But one of the things that we uncovered is something that I feel like we all in the industry kind of know and feel, is that we are a huge contributor to the state's ecosystem and the GDP, directly impacting the GDP. So for context, the music ecosystem direct GDP impact is $6.37 billion annually. Spectator sports, which get a lot of time and resources and attention, is 1.23 billion, and crops produced is 6.71. So as you can see, we're in some pretty good company with other industries, and we make a huge impact in our state.
That was billion with a B.
Yeah, with a B.
Yeah, wild. So that is like significant impact to the bottom line, to the GDP for the state. Usually GDP is an important metric in making decisions of where to allocate resources, infrastructure investments, policy decisions. I think I know the answer to this, but do we see an equal investment in the music ecosystem based on what our contribution is to the GDP?
Not right now. When we asked for feedback, only 1.5% of income for artists and music workers was coming from grants. So that investment is significantly is an area where we need to significantly improve and get resources out to our people.
I think a lot of why we want to have this conversation today too is to hear statistics like this, so that we all really understand what the full picture is and how much potential opportunity and also leverage that this community and this ecosystem has to be able to lobby for and advocate for more resources and more infrastructure and more investment for music and arts in the creative communities, given how much it contributes and how much we all contribute to the bottom line. So again, thank you all for being here and for helping us to understand this a little better. I did get a preview of some of the data that you're going to share probably in September out more publicly. But one of the things that really stood out for me, besides that big $1 billion number, is it really validated an assumption I think that we all already have, which is that musicians earn less than 30% of their total annual income from music here, meaning they generally have to have one or two additional jobs outside of music to support themselves. And I think it also said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, artists also spend up to 60% of that total income to pursue their music. So meaning they're reinvesting in themselves at a loss every single year. In what ways, I mean, this is a really big question, right? But like, in what ways can we use this data to help make music a viable career in Washington State?
Well, this just shows that we need to invest a lot in our people and our music infrastructure. Things like enticing more labels, more booking agencies, management companies, those types of resources that can really help an artist create a long-standing career. As right now, they're having to do so much on their own just to get like a toehold in there and book their own tours. And we all know how expensive that is to get in and out of Washington and the Pacific Northwest because of the geography of our state and where we're located within the continental US. So this is a huge opportunity that we can be sharing what the reality looks like for our working musicians to be able to advocate for more resources to be directed towards building out the infrastructure.
Kate or Jordan, do you have anything to add?
I think it's important to add that the numbers that we have we have a set of numbers before the pandemic as well as after, and a lot of those like very stark changes are like artist expenses have more than doubled. So like you're seeing like, yeah, their income is coming from the same places, a little bit music, a lot of other things, but their expenses have not even kept in line with that income. So like your income's sort of similar, but your expenses for like a solo act went up almost 67%. So there's a lot of things where we're looking at like, how do we help with those expenses? Like we talked, like Leigh mentioned, only like 1.5% of an artist's income comes from grants. So you're working double time in all your other jobs, but you're not getting any support from the government or subsidies or just the industry as a whole to be able to continue with those artistic expenses.
Exactly. And we're showing that like 97.8% of all the live music performances Washington artists are doing are within the state, which is fantastic for us. That means there's so much music here, but it also shows an indication that we're not doing enough to help get our Washington artists on the road and making a splash on the national platform.
Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
Thank you, Jess. One of the things that I think is so important about this study, and one of the reasons everyone works so hard to get the funding to be able to do this Washington Music Census, is because even though it sounds nerdy, data is the language of policy. right? That is what our policymakers look at when they are trying to make decisions about where to invest. And we just haven't had that data because the way the state tracks jobs, it doesn't track gig economy workers effectively. And most musicians, most people working in the music industry are indeed gig economy workers. So they don't get tracked well. And that data isn't there for our decision makers to look at. But now we're going to have it in September.
And there is a high percentage of, or not high percentage, but there is well known that not all income gets reported. So the opportunity that the census had to really get into it and talk to artists about what their income was, whether or not it was reported or not, so that we can get a real-time look at what a working musician is facing, what their earnings are. This has been extremely effective tool and resource. We also have seen that this data can lead to positive changes in our industry. Cloudbreak music festival is a huge indicator. I mean, is a great example of that. When the venues were closed during the pandemic, we shared what the economic impact of tourism that we have on the state's economy, and the tourists, Visit Seattle heard that, and they said, well, we're going to start to direct some of these funds we come from taxes from the hotels into a music program that's going to help our artists and our venues. So real life example that is very recent and is still in effect. So this data is really important.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other top line findings? I know you'll release the full report in September that everybody can sort of dive into and put a little more story to the numbers and spend time with them to digest, because I know it's a lot and it's hard to just sort of rattle off numbers and have people be able to absorb that. But any other like top line findings from the Washington Music Census that you wanted to be sure to share today?
Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to know was how confident in your career do you feel, especially in regards to continuing to pursue your career, and how does the housing cost, the high cost of housing in our state, how is that affecting you? What we heard is up to 44% of musicians are considering relocating within the state due to housing costs. And almost 40% of them are also considering leaving Washington altogether, which is a staggering number when you think of how many people who are out there making music and making a living through music, and they're just not seeing this as a viable place to do that. Expenses with rehearsal spaces and rent, and how much money you have to make outside of your music income just to get your cost of living taken care of, is a huge impact for artists in our state, artists everywhere, but especially in these high cost areas. So we also asked, like, if you did leave Washington, where would you consider going? Oregon came in top at 35%. Another country, what we understand, this was during January, February, when we were all kind of wishing we could move to another country, came in second at 20%, California at 19%, New York at 18%. So if you're looking at those two states that have a very similar cost of living to Washington, Seattle area, LA, and New York, that screams that even in the high cost living situations, it's a lack of infrastructure that is keeping an artist here or getting them on the road.
And on that, the one number that we didn't mention is that when we did ask if you're planning to go somewhere to further your career, still about a third of artists are considering leaving the state just because of that infrastructure and what Washington lacks.
So again, another like great important reason why we needed this data, so that we can start to lobby and advocate and draft policy and find legislative champions that can help us move forward some of these initiatives related to infrastructure, related to cost of living and things like that. So super grateful for you all and for WANMA for leading that effort. I think that we all look forward to, or many of us look forward to, diving into those numbers more deeply in September. And we will make sure that when you guys are ready to distribute that, we can make sure that it gets sent out to all of the viewers that are here today directly, so you all can see it. So now I want to jump to NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association's, what is it? The economic
State of live.
study. Yeah, the state of live. Kate, I'm wondering if you can give us some top line findings from the state of live music nationally from their report.
Oh, I do not have that data in front of me right now, but I can tell you this, a fair amount of the independent live music venues have not recovered. They are operating at negative margins right now. So they have not recovered from the pandemic. They do not have their full audiences back, and they are still struggling across the country. This study showed that. So yeah.
Yeah,
it was
64% of stages were not
64%,
profitable in 2024.
That's a huge number.
Huge.
And
Yeah,
on
huge
top
number.
of that, they're reporting that only like 30% of their expenses are going directly to artists. So you're looking at huge rent expenses, huge staffing expenses, and it's just not even equitable on the back end of where the money has to go to make it make sense.
And I'm seeing here that the total economic output is 153.1 billion.
Yeah.
So again,
Incredible.
incredibly significant, incredibly significant.
Whereas like you look at Washington State and we said like our like $6 billion to the GDP nationally, it's closer to like $86.2 billion contributing to the national GDP for this study, which was mostly focused on venues just specifically. So not everyone.
Right.
You know, it's much, much larger when you start to include the rest of the ecosystem into that. I know we took a lot of steps to make sure that for our study to include the workers, because it's sort of that invisible half. You know, a lot of artists also work at venues, and you just see that you don't always see who's on stage, but that for that one person on stage, you have 1,000 more people that are making that show happen. So when you look at the venues just reporting, you know, close to $90 billion, you know that there's a lot more that goes into it, whether that's, you know, the artist's income and contributions, the production companies, and everything else that makes music come together.
Well, thank you all for sharing this data with us, and to everybody who's watching, we can also send you a link to the NIVA study results. Those have been published and are live. I believe it's just on the NIVA website /state of live. But if maybe we can also stick that in the chat, so you all can consume that. But now I'd like us to get into a bigger conversation. So I'd like to welcome our other panelists to join us. Shaina, Victoria, and Shannon, welcome. There's a lot of us here today, so let's do some more intros. Shaina, how about you go first?
Hello, I'm Shaina Foley. I'm currently the general manager at the Crocodile Venues. That's the Crocodile, Madame Lou's, and Hereafter. And we are also producing the shows on Pier 62 in collaboration with Friends of the Waterfront this year. I'm also a Seattle Music Commission member, and Crocodile is members in WANMA and NIVA as well. So we are very grateful. We're reaping a lot of rewards from this data that's come out.
Thank you, Shaina. And a fellow music commissioner, Shannon, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Shannon Wells. I'm the co-chair of the Advocacy and Economic Development Committee on the Seattle Music Commission. I am the founder of Friends of the Showbox and co-led the campaign to landmark this iconic venue and save it from demolition. And during the pandemic, I was very involved in WANMA and Keep Music Live to educate our policymakers about the music industry, and also to advocate for our venue workers and to raise funds to save our independent venues from closure during the pandemic.
Huge, huge efforts. Thank you for doing all of that for this community. Victoria.
Hi, my name is Victoria Contreras. My artist name is V. Contreras. I'm a vocalist and a songwriter. I currently serve as the VP of the Recording Academy's Pacific Northwest Chapter, and I'm in my 4th year as our Grammy Advocacy co-chair. I spent 20 years at Washington State's largest nonprofit arts organization, STG, and 10 of those years I was working on the leadership team as the head of sales and service, where I work closely on multiple legislative initiatives. That includes helping draft our state's anti-bot bill and collaborating with lawmakers on ticketing legislation. It's a pleasure to be here and to share this conversation about music advocacy, something that each and every one of us is so passionate about.
Again, thank you all for being here. There's a lot of us, and everybody on this in this conversation has done some really incredible epic things that we won't be able to get to all of today. But I'm hoping that what we can do is really highlight some tactical strategies and ways that artists can get involved in the fight, that artists can get involved in advocacy and lobbying, and really tangible ways to help to move the needle forward. So to kick us off, we've just heard a lot about data. And now I want to dive into how to leverage that data to move the needle. So one key thing that I've learned in my years doing advocacy work is the importance of storytelling, of humanizing issues and putting real faces in front of lawmakers as they write and debate and vote on policy and legislation. So I'm going to ask each of you maybe to talk a little bit about pairing data with storytelling by sharing an example or two of how this has been a successful tactic for you in a way that can be replicable for others. So Victoria, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, gosh, we just found out so much incredible data. And I think, like Kate said, data is policymakers' language. So it's really important for us to be using this to leverage these conversations. It shows the scale of the problem while stories really show the soul of it. And when we advocate, we need both numbers that highlight the systematic impact and personal stories that make lawmakers care. And stories are often what sticks. You can say 80% of songwriters earn $5,000 a year from streaming, and most people are going to forget a lot of that stat. But if you say, I've written music my whole life, and it's reached millions and I still can't pay my rent, that's a story they remember. So I really feel like these two elements balance each other out, and it's incredible that we're starting to get more data. Do you want me to give a specific example?
Sure.
Okay. So I was involved with a piece of legislation called the Fair Pay for Fair Play Act. It is now the American Music Fairness Act, and the bill would finally ensure that artists get paid when their music is played on AM/FM radio, just like they are when we're streamed or on satellite radio. And I first showed up with this in 2015 at Grammys on the Hill. And I walked into a meeting with a key member of the House Judiciary Committee, and our group was bracing for a battle. The year before, the person had adamantly opposed the bill. They said this person ate us for breakfast. And so we were very nervous going in, but someone in our group had stayed in touch with this person over the previous year. They shared industry context, told real stories, shared data, and there was another really powerful story shared at the meeting from a manager who was managing an artist who was couch surfing despite just having released a huge song that we all knew. And at that meeting, this congressperson flipped their position. And it was this mix of authentic stories, data, and relationship building that helped change this person's mind. And today, this person is a huge champion of the bill and one of the lead sponsors. So yeah, it was an incredible moment for sure.
Thank you for sharing that story. Kate, I know you've seen this a million times. A lot of us have been in rooms when that light bulb moment happens, and it's so powerful. Like it gives me chills just sort of thinking about that moment, because it really is when all of this comes to life, right? And it finally clicks for a lawmaker who is, in some way, some are very involved, but there's a million things going on, and they can be really detached from what's going on in the day-to-day lives of their constituencies, and to really be able to see it, it is really powerful for them, and in turn can really help make a difference, as you just described. So Shannon, I know you've had a lot of experience in this sort of storytelling too with some of your initiatives. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. I'm probably echoing what Victoria just said. The way I think of data is evidence. I don't lead arguments with data. I don't think data actually moves people or inspires action. I think that, as people are saying, it's the storytelling that does, but the data becomes your evidence. And so when we were trying to lobby for grant funding from the state for either venue workers or venues during the pandemic, I realized that we didn't have good data, and that a lot of the data for our sector was focused on nonprofits and like nonprofit arts. So we're like trying to figure out ways to put the data together to tell this compelling story. And we were just really putting things that maybe didn't really exactly fit our system. So this is really great that we have the Washington Music Census now. So we have some really specific data. But basically, I think that context is important, and citing your sources. Like when talking about data, like use the right data for the right moment. Be strategic about the data that you're going to use and weave it into a story. Like for the showbox, you know, when we would go and testify in city council and at landmark meetings, we weren't really relying on a lot of data. We had, you know, stories about the years of the venue and the personal experiences of the people. I heard you say something about how can artists get involved in these types of things. Some performers would show up and sing songs, and that is a really powerful moment, singing a song to city council. And it goes straight to your heart and to your empathy. And in some way that bypasses all the data. So I'm a strategic data user. Use it where it matters, but it doesn't have to be everything in your story.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else have anything they want to add really quickly to data and storytelling?
I would love to, Jess. Invite folks to your shows. When you are performing, invite the decision makers to come actually see what you are doing. It can really turn the tables. If, you know, a lot of politicians go to bed early at night and they get up early in the morning and they're not out at midnight to see the great show. So you got to invite them and help them feel comfortable in that environment. And an example of that is a very high level person who works in the city attorney's office these days. I'll leave him unnamed, but we had a free Macklemore show happening at Numos, and the city was preparing to shut it down, right? And I was advocating for this show to be able to go on. Numos had made all the right preparations to keep the community safe, and we're really doing a good job, but the city was a little concerned that Macklemore was doing a free show on Capitol Hill. So I invited this person from the city attorney's office to come with me to the show. And mid-show, hands in the air, I'm not kidding, having a blast, right? Just hearing the love from the stage for Seattle from the artist, and seeing the crowd so enthusiastic won him over instantly. And it was a rather high-risk moment. So, you know, bring them out to your shows, let them see what you're doing, invite them to come to your performances. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Shannon, your point very well taken too. If you do get a meeting, if you're involved in a meeting, if you are going to do public comment at city council, consider, you know, doing it as a song. I mean, it really does make a huge difference. And they hear talking nonstop, constantly from every type of person and type of group. And it's like, honestly, it always stands out because it's a break in the noise and a break in the monotony. And it's very compelling. So that's a great suggestion. Okay, all of you have been involved in initiatives, policy, legislation that is really significant and has been successful. But politics moves really slowly. And a lot of these projects have been multi-year campaigns, multi-year initiatives. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach sustaining engagement, how you keep yourself sort of centered and motivated on moving it forward when progress isn't immediate, and if you've sort of built a coalition of people around you and volunteers and folks that are working on these sort of big changes with you, how you keep people motivated and sort of sustain the energy to keep it moving? Victoria, do you want to start? I know the anti-bot legislation was like a 10-year project.
Yeah, and yes, gosh, politics is like the ultimate slow burn, which means we have to stay steady. For me, sustaining engagement starts with showing up, not just once, but consistently, and setting up meetings and making calls throughout the year, and remembering that your tax dollars are paying their salaries. They work for you. And with the anti-bot legislation, when I first got involved, honestly, I thought legislation was something that happened to us, not something that we could shape. And I realized quickly, firsthand, how powerful our voices can be, and it really taught me a few key things. One is that no bill is perfect, and the bot legislation, which later influenced federal bill, had real gaps around enforcement, and we're seeing that with some of our AI bills, that they're not perfect, but we can't wait for perfection, particularly as it pertains to tech, which is constantly evolving. So sometimes progress is the priority. Secondly, when you're working on legislation and building a coalition, I like to think of the education part of it, because the bot bill became a tool for educating lawmakers and the community and even the Attorney General's office about how bots hurt both fans and artists. When constituents understood that bots were taking the best tickets and moving them to the secondary market, they were like, oh, I'm not mad at you anymore. So it's an educational moment to bring us all together. And then lastly, just, anyone can get involved, even without a political background. And after my experience working on that bill, I became someone legislators would call to help shape future ticketing laws. And we built basically a coalition of stakeholders who all had skin in the game, who could all speak the same language, so that legislation made sense. It didn't sound like the Attorney General wrote it. It sounded like the stakeholders wrote it. And so it was a work in progress. We met every week over the phone. Zoom wasn't widely used at that time. And it was a really, really exciting time when it actually became law. So those are my tips for building coalitions and keeping close to legislation.
I think you're talking too a little bit about like organic grassroots organizing too. And Leigh, I'd love to ask you to talk a little bit about the Connor Byrne Co-op as an example, and give just a little background about what it was and how it happened. But that is such a shining example in Seattle of a community coming together.
Absolutely. And when we first got word that the owner was needing to sell the venue, not that he wanted to, but it was just, he couldn't keep it going any further. We were in real danger of losing that space, which is so important to so many artists as a first stage. Open mic nights are incredibly popular and are such a great way to get themselves into the industry. Um, and so it was like, even though it was a little scary at first, the employees decided to come together and form a co-op. And that momentum, that first decision of like, okay, so how do we do this? And coming together and bringing in people, because none of us knew how to do it on our own. And so we'd bring in people who had that expertise and who had a passion for the space. And so we were putting together everything on the back end before we even announced that that was an option that we were going to be pursuing. But once we did, it was amazing to see how important the space was to so many people. We got media attention. There was a groundswell of people who have love and support for that place and its continuation. And so there was really exciting, and we're just getting into the end of our first year of actually making that happen. And so we're at this place now where that momentum has quelled a little, but the people who are working every day to make it happen, we're still getting people who want to come in and be a part of it and who have ideas and who want to make some changes and who want to do the work to make that place better. But it is really difficult to sustain that. And I imagine over a 10-year period with the bot bill and other programs and resources that people have been working on, it is really challenging to do that. So finding people to share their expertise, asking them to come in and be a part of it is essential. But also, if you have that and you have an interest in it, even if you don't know exactly where to start, there's a place for you. You just want to get involved, come in and ask. And most often people are very excited to have you there because it is a lot of work, and the more we can spread it around, the more likely it is going to be sustainable.
Totally right. If you want to get involved, there are many endless ways to get involved. Raise your hand, reach out to somebody. Any of us, we all know probably 10 different initiatives at any given time that really need people to get involved. And Victoria said this, but I want to reinforce the point that like you don't have to be an expert in government or politics or anything. You don't even have to know what any of the terms mean. You don't have to know how the city budget works. You don't have to know any of that stuff to be able to tell a personal story, to contribute in a way that suits your skill set or your interest. So, you know, Leigh, we had a conversation previously about the Connor Burn Co-op initiative, and we were talking about, you know, over a multi-year initiative with a big coalition, and people come in and out and people move away, and different legislators are elected and term out, and, you know, leadership of certain initiatives, people leave their jobs and stuff. And so you don't always have like one cohesive unit working together for the whole period of time or sustained period of time. You might have key stakeholders in and out, new people coming in. And so I think it's important also to remind people that like the best way to tackle it is sort of as a community and as a group, and sort of like assigning, really bifurcating it into sizable chunks. You don't have to move the whole thing forward yourself. So Shaina, I wanted to ask you, several of us here were involved in the music artist load and parking zones in front of venues legislation that the Seattle Music Commission worked on. You know, Shannon, I think, was in it for a really long time. I've been sort of in it from the middle, and I know that you came in and did a ton of heavy lifting over the last year, offering up your venue. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about jumping in full force while something was already in motion.
I would love to. And I would love to say, I think my first dipping my toe into advocacy was as a teen and in my early 20s doing street team stuff for a music venue label and artist. That's not something you think of as advocating, but you're out there, you're volunteering your time, you're dedicated, you are spreading the word on an artist. So if you have ever made a mixtape with a bunch of local artists and shared it with your friends, you're technically an advocate. So good job. And so I found myself added to the Seattle Music Commission in 2024. I was very excited and very new to being on a commission like that. My whole life I spent doing production and a lot of behind the scenes things. And so thinking of drafting legislation or even coming up with some kind of policy recommendation on my own sounded very daunting. Luckily, Shannon and Jessica and other members of the commission had already drafted that legislation. And honestly, I'm sure we're getting pretty tired of talking about it over and over and over again and thinking about it. So what I found that I could add to that group is a network of people that either are fans of the Crocodile as a venue that we could shout out and reach out to, or contacts that I've made throughout my career, band members that I could call and say, hey, I remember that time you tried to park in front of the venue and we had no parking and I had to find you a space around the block. Or remember that time you had to park a mile away and your van got broken into. There were just so many examples of very powerful stories that I could find other artists to share. When I went to work doing that, it was a pretty simple ask for me. I had a list of all of those folks. I asked them very specifically, you know, what I needed from them. Write me a 250 to 500 word paragraph and send it over to our council. We got a lot of letters and a lot of personal stories. And as we said before, those were very high impact. I felt very proud to be sitting during those meetings and hearing some of those stories read by the council members, whether it was from band members or fans or other venues. And so, yeah, that was a great impact. It felt like a small thing, but at the end, I got to, run it through the finish line. So it's kind of exciting.
Thank you. And Shannon, I wanted to sort of ask you something similar around Keep Music Live, which there were a lot of people involved in. It was a time of crisis for everybody. Can you just talk a little bit about that project and how you were able to sort of build a coalition of people to make impact?
Sure. Yeah, I jumped into Keep Music Live probably early on as a champion. There are a few of us on the call here that were also champions. So we became advisors essentially to this project, which was kind of an offshoot of WANMA. It had a lot of the same people in WANMA, but it was still its own separate thing and had other people in the community not involved in WANMA who jumped in this. And we wanted to raise funds to give as grants to independent music venues in Washington state during the pandemic. So what's interesting in that for me is that there were people that I had never met and maybe never would have come in contact with in that group. So different business owners, lawyers, like I'm used to the music venues, the workers, the artists, that kind of thing. So it was putting me in a different community of people, but the common denominator there was that we were all very passionate about music and we did not want these venues to go away. So for me, I just thought about how can I personally contribute? Like what's my skill set? And I think everyone brought their skill set to it. And I good at distilling complex information. I like policy and kind of all that nerdy stuff, and did get a bit obsessed on the data, of like, where is it coming from and what does it mean? But and I really discovered that legislators don't know anything about our industry. And so this was a great opportunity to educate them through the stories and the numbers and all of that. So yeah, it was just a really great experience. But I mean, most of my advocacy, I would say in the last 7 years, I've been kind of in overdrive on music advocacy, but it mostly has been crisis driven, where something happens and we must do something now. So I don't have a ton of experience in like long-term, like building legislative type things, over 10 years like Victoria, but I do know that it is very hard to keep people's attention. And so I think the communication aspect is really, really important because people don't, we have really short attention spans, so yeah, that was just a little fragment of my experience there to share.
Jordan, do you want to add anything related to WANMA?
I was just going to add on to the Keep Music Live story of it was such one of the first times I feel like the whole ecosystem really collaborated together to save something important. Because usually it's like we're fighting for this one specific thing about tickets or artists or venues. And it was the first time I think a lot of us really all ended up in a room where it's like we have corporate folks, we have people from Starbucks and Amazon and a lot of like these bigger companies, as well as bigger artists that are from here that came back to help us support smaller artists in smaller spaces that they hadn't played in decades. Most of our fundraisers through that were actually hosted by Sir Mix-a-Lot, and he supported us so much and donated so much time and money that we ended up being able to actually turn that into bigger connections and legislative moves. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people here were involved in. We were able to honor Sir Mix-a-Lot through the city of Seattle and King County as like a Sir Mix-a-Lot Day. And when we talk about, how do you maintain relationships as you're working on that, 10-year goal, a lot of that is those like small wins. If you can hand someone like this easy win, it's like, okay, like it might take like, we could get a Sir Mix-a-Lot Day tomorrow because it's not a heavy lift. And while we can say that's a win and the politicians feel like it's cool and it's a win, like we're already working on like that 1 year, 2 year goal of like, oh, we want an educational, series. And at the same time, like that 10-year goal is still there, but you can maintain those relationships with those policymakers by working on the smaller projects. And a small win's still a win. So it doesn't really matter how big or small it is, as long as it moves you in the right direction.
100%. I say this all the time, like incremental change is still change. I did a panel at Treefort with Saul, and he actually talks about the same thing related to music career, right? Like if you don't celebrate the victories along the way, you'll always feel like you've never made any progress or you've never made it. So it's like you might only sell 200 more records than you did the last cycle, but it's 200 more records, or you played to 50 more people or whatever it is. But like celebrating those, it's just an emotional trigger for you personally that will help to keep you motivated. And I think it applies in almost every aspect of your life, but really in terms of sort of moving some of these big grassroots things that have a lot of people involved in it together. If you can celebrate the victories together, it keeps people incentivized to move forward. It keeps people motivated and excited. Like I'm part of something that's big and exciting and it's making moves, and it might take a long time, but like, look, we're making progress. Leigh, I think you experienced that quite a bit with the Connor Byrne Co-op.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of, back to my band management days, artist management days, it was hard to keep musicians going because they didn't stop and celebrate those incremental movements. And so part of what my job and my role is to help make sure that they're still pointing in the right direction and that they see that there's progress. And I took that skill set into my work with Connor Byrne and just making sure that we had a clear and definable goal and a timeline that we needed to make that happen. So then it was a matter of getting the information out there to the larger community in this case, to let folks know and be transparent about what our needs were, but also give opportunities for, like, we need to make this initial amount to cover our initial startup fees, our lawyer fees and things like that. Then we need to make this to be able to reopen. And then we need to do this to do this. So like letting people know that incremental steps in giving an opportunity to celebrate those wins, however big or small they are still really meaningful and impactful. And it can be hard to keep trudging through something when it feels like you're not moving very much. But then when you look back, even 5 years back, you're like, actually, I've grown so much and I've done so much. This is really important to maintain your growth and your hope and your investment in your project as well.
For sure. Several of you in this conversation have mentioned champions, and I think about the need for legislative champions too. I know that was really important in our fight for the musician loading zones and venue parking. Kate, you have so much experience with policymakers. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about building relationships with lawmakers and stewarding them over time to engage them in policy issues.
Sure, I'd love to, Jess. So politicians and legislators are humans first, right? So if you can find a way to connect with them on an emotional level, you might be able to get them to come along with you and hear what you're saying and consider your issues, right? So that is really an important thing, not to treat them like they're out of reach, but that they are, well, frankly, they're a public servant who's elected with your dollars and they are accountable to you, as V was referencing earlier. So don't hesitate to leverage that. That is your opportunity. Be gracious, make sure that you are, not, if you start from a contentious point, you're going to have a contentious relationship. If you start from a gracious point, you have a much better entree to getting to the heart of the issue and working on the hard things with them. So, I have recently watched the city of Portland, led by Music Portland, do something really amazing. Before their last city council election, they held a panel and they asked every single contender for those council positions what their position was on music. And they raised the issues that they were concerned with in the Portland music community with these folks. All of them got elected, and they now have the most pro-music city council that I know of anywhere in the country. We all have an opportunity to do the same thing here. On October 7th and October 8th, Inspire Washington is hosting 2 forums at Town Hall with the folks who are running for office right now. On the 7th, it is focused on King County elections, and on the 8th, it is the City of Seattle elections. This is really our chance to show up and ask the folks who are running for office the questions to get them thinking about the music industry, what they can do, and for you and all of us to convey the importance of the issues at hand to the folks who will be our new political leaders.
Thanks for that, Kate. And that's a great way for everybody tuning in today to show up, right? Like, it's low lift, show up. Also vote.
Vote, yes.
Vote every time you have an opportunity, please vote, use your voice. Well, we are just about out of time, and Kate, you segued us perfectly into sort of my wrap-up question for everybody, which is just like, as a first step, what can people do today, right now, to get started? You know, we've talked about letter writing, public comment, phone calls, council meetings. You know, anybody want to shout out some ways that people can get involved? Or did I just say them all?
I'm happy to add to that great list. I just want to just hit this home again, that our stories are really the strategy, and we're not showing up expecting instant results. We're showing up to lay bricks. And like Shannon said, bring your instrument if you get a meeting with a legislator. But to add to your list, there's this pretty cool app called 5 Calls that'll help you find issues, get notifications, and make calls quickly and easily. And it tracks your actions to your representatives. So I would suggest that is just a tangible thing that you can do. And then take meetings, you know, sit down and talk to your legislators. And the last thing I'll just say on that is, while advocacy seems political, music itself isn't partisan. It's deeply personal. You're going to be meeting with lawmakers who may not share the same political views, but when we center the conversation on fairness and creativity, we find common ground. And that's really the beauty of music. So if you are a Grammy member, don't miss Grammy Music Advocate Day on September 25th, a perfect chance to meet your representatives.
For sure. And, you know, I think everybody has said this in one way or another, but just as a reminder, we elect these people and they work for us, right? So it's important to hold your power and know your power and remember your power, right? And your power is your vote. We have learned, particularly through like Grammy Music Advocacy Day, that there's like an intimidation factor. People don't know how to engage with politicians. People just don't know what the protocols are. And it feels like this totally distant world that you are not immersed in. And it's okay to just pick up the phone and talk to them. Like Kate said, they're humans first, they're people first. Hearing the stories of their constituents is a huge part of their job. So part of your job then, you know, as a constituent and as, you know, like your civic duty is to engage and to vote and to call them and to tell them like what your community needs and, you know, the things that are priorities for you, whether that's music related or, you know, healthcare related or, you know, schools related, all of it. It's like really important to remember. And like, I know for me, when I first started, you know, in this about 15 or so years ago, flipping that switch for me boosted my confidence so much. I was like, oh, okay, I got this now. You know, and sometimes it just takes that little thing. So I encourage everyone to think about that. Any last thoughts from anyone before we wrap this up?
I would say that if you are still too nervous to reach out to your local council or any of your government representatives, I think for myself, I found a good thing is to just contact people that are in the nonprofit world that are doing things in the sphere that you're interested in getting involved in. So if you reach out to, let's say, Bumbershoot as an example, they're a nonprofit arts association, and just say, I've been having so much fun going to Bumbershoot for the last 10 years. If there's ever a call to action that you need me for, please add me to your list. I'd be happy to write a letter. That will help you get a topic and most of the time get a script. And we'll kind of intro you to some organizations that can really use your help. And speaking from someone that runs a business that I often don't get to hear positive things from people face to face, getting a positive and an encouraging email is one of the best ways to support other advocates and to keep the juices flowing and get us all jazzed up. So it kills two birds with one stone.
Thanks for that, Shaina. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate this robust conversation. Thank you to Leigh and Kate and Jordan for sharing that data with us. Like we've said, we'll make sure that when everything's public, we send it all out to everyone who's viewing today. And thank you, Victoria, Shannon, and Shaina for adding additional context to our conversation. Appreciate you all. Thanks everyone who tuned in today and who's watching on YouTube. We host an episode in this series the first Tuesday of every month. Next month, we'll be diving into marketing, and that'll be a two-part series related to marketing, PR, and social that span September and October, the first Tuesdays of those 2 months. So we hope that you'll join us again then. And thanks so much for being here. And thanks to all of our panelists.